Welcome to this week's episode of the Heart to Heart podcast. Mark and I had an incredible conversation with casting director Patrick Rush, whose work on The OC, Everwood, and Party of Five helped shape the careers of some of Hollywood's biggest names. Patrick gives us a behind-the-scenes look at the casting world, shares personal stories from his career, and offers invaluable advice for aspiring actors. If you're passionate about storytelling, acting, or just love a great Hollywood tale, you won't want to miss this conversation. Now, before you listen, make sure to please rate the podcast 5 stars and leave us a review.
With all that's going on in the world, what would you say, Patrick, is your all-time favorite cookie?
Oatmeal raisin.
Oh my gosh, oatmeal raisin. Because I came with mine, and I'm going to hear Brian's in a second. What do you think of Oreo?
They'll do it a
But
pinch.
not like oatmeal raisin. Oatmeal raisin.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I have some Halloween Oreos in the kitchen, but I've had them for like 2 weeks.
Halloween Oreos.
But if there are oatmeal raisin cookies in the kitchen, they're gone. They're gone.
And Brian, what's yours?
I don't really eat cookies. I mean,
Okay.
like chocolate chip cookies, I guess.
Okay.
Brian, that's a weak ass answer. What do you mean you don't really eat cookies?
I don't really eat like snacks. I eat so well during my regular meals. I don't like much.
Oh, I see.
So Patrick,
You stretch-
the first word that really does come to my head, at least when I was looking over your materials, were are you familiar with Horatio Algier hero? It's a term
I know.
that my teacher in like the 3rd grade used to use. There was this guy named Horatio Algier. He was an author, 1832, I believe he went from. Anyways, he was known for writing books for young kids, but all of his stories were always about the guy who's risen up with all kinds of adversity. And you have such a great story because as it pertains to the industry, you started as a tour guide at Universal, isn't that right?
Actually, one step below, I was not a tour guide. Sandy Logan was. Sandy Logan and Tony Sepulveda were tour guides.
Wow.
But I worked food service. I didn't even have enough self-esteem to even want to be, think that I could sit in front of people and give a tour. I was selling hot dogs in the park.
And then from there, how did you get to the mailroom?
Luckily, my dad worked at Universal for 38 years, and he was the head of the film library and film research department. And I'm using bad air quotes because that's actually what he did for a living. But what I found out after he passed away was that he also ran the gambling ring out of Universal. He was like the bookie.
Wow.
I mean, I knew my dad was a bookie. I knew that he was running gambling rings out of our home.
Wow.
Because we know he was smart to make extra money. That's a good way.
He had 8 kids.
Yeah.
I was the 7th of 8. He was running a side hustle.
Wow.
But anyway, that's probably,
Well, hold on now.
If I even,
From your dad, do you feel like the baton has been passed? And, listen, my dad was a little bit of a gambler too. Like he liked to take chances. I'm sure some of that has passed on to you.
every good thing in my dad's DNA I got, and every bad thing in his DNA I got. So yes, when you're like a 10-year-old kid and you know that some team has to beat the over-unders or what's the spread of the game. I mean, I grew up with that sort of language in the house. And, I got my driver's license the day I turned 16 and started running money. So,
was there ever a day, Patrick, I always wondered this, was there ever a day where, let's just say, the guy had several bets on a team that actually, went contrary to what he thought was, and he was out a lot because of the, the overriding majority of the people won and he lost?
Well, because my dad was the house,
yes.
my dad kept scraps of papers with initials and stuff. I never knew who any of the people were, but I certainly know, like watching a football game with my dad and seeing a team score in the last 2 seconds and seeing the blood drain out of my dad's face, I knew that the house took a hit.
Yes.
And on a Monday morning, we could have a brand new Cadillac convertible, and the following Monday, the nuns at Catholic school could say your tuition hasn't been paid. So it was just, that's the house I grew up in, and nothing seemed odd about that to me as a kid. But anyway, the very long-winded answer was my dad wanted me to be a film editor, and so I took some classes and sat in some rooms, and I just knew I didn't want to sit in the dark and try to piece together stuff like that. So I honestly didn't know any better than to say, doesn't everyone start in the mailroom? And because that was all I'd ever heard. Like, everyone starts in the mailroom. So, I got on the list, and it took about 6 months, and I got in the mailroom. And
how old were you when you were in the mailroom? Can I ask? 17, 18?
No, probably 20. Wait, it was 1984, so I was 23.
Okay.
Yeah, 23. And my first day there, I just talked to the people that worked there, and some of the people were like, well, I've been here 7 years. I've been here 8 years. And I was like, wait, what? It staggered me that I was like, oh, fuck, this is a mistake. Oh, shit.
Oh, that's fine.
That's okay.
We love it.
You can believe that. And I was like, damn, 7, 8 years. And, I will tell you, my first day there, they just said to me, we're going to give you the top 8 floors of the Black Tower. That's where the meanest secretaries, when they were called secretaries, that's where the meanest secretaries are. Nobody likes that, to take mail up there. They're always mean. I was like, okay. So, I just took my little card and delivered mail to the secretaries on the top 8 floors of the Black Tower. They couldn't have been nicer. They couldn't have been more pleased to get like the right mail. And then they legitimately looked out for me. And 6 weeks later, I had a job interview and I was out of the mail.
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Unbelievable. I was going to say that. That is quick.
It was fast, but those people on the top 8 floor, they're the ones that know everything that's going on and everything that's happening. And they couldn't have been nicer to me. Couldn't have been nicer. And so
what was that first break? What was the first assistant's job?
It was a production assistant on a movie called Gotcha with Anthony Edwards and Linda Fiorentino.
Oh my gosh, Linda Fiorentino, that's incredible.
Where is she? I miss her.
Yeah, she hung out at a bar that I used to bartend at, and with she was dating, I think, John Dahl or so. Anyway, some well-known director.
A director, John Byram.
Yeah,
John Byram.
Yeah. Oh. And anyways, believe it or not, at this bar that Sheila Jaffe was the hostess. Anyway, wow. Yeah. So
see, Linda Fiorentino was one of those, like, I loved her. And I think she could have been a big movie star, but I think she had a bit of the demons, like me.
She was excellent in the film cinematography. Yeah.
Yeah, she was old school. She was like an old movie star.
She was, yes. Yeah. Okay, so you're working on that production, and then what happens after that?
The man who hired me was a producer named Peter McGregor Scott, like a funny Scotsman, and he took me with him to the next movie that he was producing at Paramount, which was called The Whoopie Boys. It was a disaster. I don't even know that it ever was released. And there were the casting directors on that project were these women named Sally Dennison and Julie Selzer. And I just kind of watched what they were doing, and they were really nice, and they seemed to love their work, and they seemed to come in at 9:30 and leave at 6:30, which was about what I could manage to, in my mind, like, I could do that. And then the next movie, Peter McGregor Scott, I stayed with him, and it was called She's Having a Baby. It was a John Hughes movie. But during that time, I had reached out to Sally and Julie and just said, hey, if you guys ever need someone to come work for 2 weeks, I'd be willing to do it for free. I've been doing this PA thing for on 3 movies, and I've seen pre-production, production, and post-production, and casting interests me. And they said yes. And they said, our assistant is going on vacation for 2 weeks, so come fill in. And I was with them for 8 years.
When you first filled in, did they take you up on the free offer? Or did they pay you?
They paid me, but that other girl never really came back from vacation.
Wow, no, that's incredible.
Well, they were saying things like, those were the days where you would have to walk the sides to the gate. Like there were not faxes and computers, and you would set up appointments, and then you would take these big yellow manila envelopes and write the character name on them, and you would post them outside the gate at Paramount, and the actors would drive, pull up to the gate, the side gate, pick up their sides, and then they were. I was just sort of doing that stuff because I didn't know better, and they were like, "Oh, she never did that," and I was like, "Well, what did she do?" So, but I just, and because of them, the first movies I got to be a casting assistant on were The Accused, uh, the RoboCop movies, Throw Mama from the Train, Heathers. There were some really cool movies I got to work on. And they were also casting a show called Duet, which was on the first season of Fox. When Fox was new, it was Married with Children, The Tracy Ullman Show, from which The Simpsons came from, and Duet. Those were the first 3 shows on Fox. And it was on for about 3 seasons, I think. And you have a question?
No, it's just that here you are, and now all of a sudden you're getting entrenched in casting. Did you know right away it sounded like you were just like, all right, well, I kind of am interested in this. Well, let's see. Did you know pretty much right away it was a fit for you?
I did. And because I was a guy who, and this is no secret, I'm very open about this. I had like a bad drug and alcohol problem, and I didn't go to college, and I didn't have any interest in going to college. And I was much more interested in drinking and snorting Coke in the 80s. And so I had to think of something like, what can I do without a college degree? And so I just got into the trenches and learned as I went. And I loved casting. And, when they were casting Throw Mama from the Train, Danny DeVito was directing it. And it was Billy Crystal and Danny DeVito. And they were looking for the role of Mama for 8 weeks.
I still remember that woman's face.
Anne Ramsey.
Yeah.
Anne Ramsey. And and they had a lot of money in the budget. They were trying to get like Helen Hayes out of retirement and Anne Bancroft in old age makeup. And they were going for a big name. And I just kept saying, you guys, I used to go to the dermatologist with this horrible woman. Her name was Anne Ramsey. And she was so scary. And, and after about 7 weeks, they said, set her up. We'll pre-read. So I called to set it up, and the agent said, she doesn't pre-read. And I said, please just do this for me. Please do this for me. So Anne Ramsey walks in the door of the office. I'm at my little assistant desk. Unbeknownst to me, in the years since I used to go to the dermatologist, she'd had cancer of the tongue, and they had cut part of her tongue off.
Oh, so that explains it. Okay.
When she spoke, she spit.
Yes, I remember when
So I send her into my bosses. I'm like, I'm sending this spitting dragon into my bosses. I'm going to get fired. I'm telling you, 5 minutes later, Julie Selzer popped her head out the door and said, call Danny DeVito. We're driving her to the office.
Wow.
And they threw Anne Ramsey in that car and drove her there. And unbeknownst to me, she'd done a movie called Going South with Danny DeVito years earlier. So when she walked in the office to Danny DeVito, she started cursing at him, going, you short little piece of shit. How could you not think of me for this part? It's made for me. And she had that part within an afternoon.
So when she had that part, do you still remember you had to be acknowledged in some way?
Sally and Julie came back from that, and they looked at me and they said, we're not going to be able to live with you anymore. You're going to be, you'll never let us hear the end of this. And they made me a casting associate, and it was very nice. Anne Ramsey and her husband took me to dinner, and she was nominated for an Academy Award. And she said, if I win, I'm going to thank you.
Oh, wow.
It was just a great story for a character actress who'd been around forever and been in the Goonies and been in stuff over the years. But it really was nice to see that happen for, just a character actress who'd been kicking around for years.
But you did something that a lot of people don't do. You stuck your neck out because you believed in it, and it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when I was like, you know what? Maybe I can do this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And you had never, prior to this, considered casting as a profession,
Not really, but I was, I was that kid who grew up, I saw Rocky 17 times in the movie theater. I love an underdog story. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned underdogs earlier, Mark, but like, I just, it wasn't like I grew up going, I want to be a casting director. I didn't even know what those words were. I just, I used to watch stuff and think, God, that person's bad, or God, that person's good. But not like it wasn't. I had no path. I was directionless. I was a kid that was so lost, and I just found my way.
On the other hand, Patrick, I have this theory. I think the reason why, I used to bartend. So the best customers were obviously the drinkers. And the regular drinkers, they were a one of a kind people in that they're drinkers because they're extra sensitive about everything in life. And as a result, they're the most interesting people, in my opinion. Do you know what I mean? I would hear some of the most incredible versions of the way they looked at life and how they saw things. And the reason they drank is because they sometimes they couldn't take what was going on around them. So what I'm getting at, you probably are a very resourceful person. And as that example in the throw mama from the drain, there was a part of you that was needing to like express yourself that way.
Right. And you described like drunks perfectly. Overly sensitive, not just sensitive, overly
Yeah.
sensitive. And I grew up in a house of drunks, and some of the greatest storytellers and some of the most sad people, and I swore I wasn't going to grow up to be like them, and I grew up to be exactly like them. But now I can sort of look at it, and coming up November 18th, I'll be 35 years clean and sober.
Oh, wow.
And so I can look at my dad and think, when I was 40, I mean, I'm 62 now. When I was 40, he had 8 kids.
Amazing. That's incredible.
No wonder he drank. I didn't have kids, and I was a drunk. So, everything that was, like I said earlier, like the best of his qualities I got, and some of the worst. Irish Alzheimer's. You only remember the resemblance. That's me.
Wow.
Like,
And
yeah.
but your dad, you said, worked at Universal, but he wasn't like really
Yeah.
in the industry, or
Well, he was, but he wasn't like a big, like, he wasn't in the Black Tower with the executives. But when I was a kid and they were making the Hindenburg, he would go to the National Archives and get the footage of the Hindenburg
Wow.
exploding, or at the beginning of the $6 Million Band, the car crash. I remember that when they would do war films like Midway. But I also like started to think, what does he really do all day? It's not like every day they need to find some film history, but that's what he did, and ran up gambling ring.
Hey, it's Brian. I'm dropping in on an important announcement. What you need to know is you have more control over your career than you think. The thing standing between you and the career you want is your connections, and that's where One-on-One Next Level comes in. If you are not a member yet, you can apply to join at oneononenextlevel.com. Press pause and do that now. If you are already a member and you are ready to get back on track, we want to invite you to book a strategy session with us led by myself personally. We will help you prioritize which classes make the most sense given your career goals. You can find these under the Resource Hub in your account portal. We can't wait to hear your success story.
So what's really nice, Patrick, is sometimes in anything in life, you have people who are, they have such an education that they can come across a little bit intimidating and very difficult to talk to or approach, where the way you tell your story, I'd like to hear from you as far as you've been at it for so long doing what you do and you love it. Is there a when you've witnessed young actors, let's just say from 30 years ago, and you've seen them grow into working, consistent actors, is there some kind of through line you've noticed when they've, when you've seen them from way back when till the time, even now that you still see them?
There's never like a through line, but it's nice to see the people who success has not changed, and it's surprising when you meet that kid and then it happens for them, and you thought they weren't going to change, and they did, and that's disappointing. And then there's people who were just always not nice. And so, I mean, no tea, no shade. Like Party of Five, when I got to work on Party of Five 30 plus years ago, those four kids on Party of Five was Matthew Fox, Scott Wolf, Nev Campbell, Lacey Chabert. Matthew Fox was always kind of, let's just say, not warm, you know? Because I'm looking at a post-it that says, "Don't say anything you'll regret."
And was that his first? Would you say that was his first big break?
Absolutely.
And how about for Nev Campbell? Was that her first big break?
Absolutely, all of them.
Wow.
Scott Wolf, Nev, Lacey Chabert was 10, 11, or 12. Nev was probably 18 or 19 and was from Canada. I think she had done something in Canada. Scott Wolf was 26, but he looked 16, and Matthew Fox. But, Nev got Scream during season 2 of Party of Five, and her life changed in a very big way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And she's sustaining. She's working all the time.
Yeah. And, Lacey Chabert, who, went from there and did Mean Girls, and now she's like the queen of Hallmark. She's happy as a clam. And let me tell you, making a lot of money as the queen of Hallmark movies. And she's happy to do it, and lovely. And Scott Wolf, lovely. And, Nev was a good girl who, when she first moved to town, she came to my gay bowling night on Monday nights because she didn't know anybody. And, but I think what happened was that sort of Scream was so big and so fast that I just think she had to get protective, and nothing negative about that at all. But, that was a lot for a young girl. And, I've seen that happen on some of these shows I've cast with younger talent, that sometimes it happens fast, and sometimes you resent the thing that made you famous and gave you those opportunities. But I mean, they were all nice except for Matthew, which, his reputation has continued to this day after Lost and, movies, and no one wants to work with him because he's got a bad reputation.
When you've witnessed the actor that pretty much was mostly doing under fives or co-stars to like that one opportunity that really landed them, major work for quite a bit, was there something that happened that you saw in the audition room that not with a particular, that's what I meant by the through line. In other words, do you feel like for someone to go from not having a lot of speaking lines to all of a sudden landing that first big thing, did something happen, or did they just come in and just do a better job than anybody?
It's weird, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but it felt like, I think Brian's heard me say this before. My dream is to get hired to cast like a Golden Girls show where I get to cast 4 old tomatoes who've been around forever, and I don't have to pre-read a bunch of 17-year-olds. But that wasn't sort of my trajectory. So every year that I would get a pilot, and it was either, The OC or Everwood or those shows, which I am grateful for, trust me. But there were times, because it's a new crop of kids every year, where you can't say no to a pre-read for a kid you haven't met before, So you're doing, and those were all in person and reading 5 pages and oftentimes crying, trying to cry and something. So, and I would just always keep a Post-it on my door. I'm famous for my Post-its. I just need one. I just need one person that day to come in that does something a little different, or I see something a little different that doesn't have desperation, that sort of inhabits that thing you can't teach often in an acting class, which is just the it factor or a natural talent, I mean, I know Meryl Streep went to acting school and studied and all that, but don't tell me that 90% of what she's got is not just God-given gift, and that, I saw it a couple of times over the years. I saw, when I was casting Party of Five a million years ago, I think Ron West, maybe at ICM, called me and said, "Goldie Hawn's daughter wants to be an actress. Will you take a general with her?" And I was like, Goldie Hawn? I love Goldie Hawn, Private Benjamin, are you kidding? And, in walks Katie Hudson, at 16. And she sat in a chair in my office, and I thought, oh my God, it's like Honey, I Shrunk Goldie.
Yes,
Oh,
that's
she's
true.
just a little version of her. And you know what? I took her in for Party of Five on a Roll the next week, and she got it, and she got her SAG card. And, there's just like somebody I want to hang with. Like, I thought,
It's funny that you say that,
like,
Patrick, because I was just going to say to you when you said you noticed that they were different and they no desperation. And I was going to say for you probably to take in a new friend these days, it probably doesn't happen often. But if someone has no desperation and there's something about that person that really causes you to have a conversation that leads to another thing that leads to, like, let's just say, hey, let's get together. It doesn't happen often, but when it happens, and regardless of the acting talent, we're just talking about a human being. It's really a breath of fresh air.
right. And I also learned, I used to have such fear of casting executives at a studio and network level because I didn't really, I thought they were the decision, if they know better than me. And, one year I was casting a pilot for the old WB before it was a CW, called My Guide to Becoming a Rock Star. And, we cast the leads, and we were now casting like the fourth and fifth roles. And one was like the goofy drummer, and one was like the backup guy, guitarist or something. And, we went to Kathleen Lettery's office over at the old WB. She was the head of casting. And I brought in Chris Pratt and another kid to test for the role of the drummer. Chris Pratt was 19.
Wow.
And I thought he was the answer. And he was dismissed in the room, and they picked the other kid. And I did not speak up.
Is this before or after Throw Mama?
Way after.
Okay.
Way after. This was when I had my own company.
Okay.
And it was,
Okay.
So I wasn't as, the Ann Ramsey thing, I was safe to just say it to my bosses. It's not like I called Danny DeVito and said, I'm Sally and Julie's assistant. You need to see this. This was sort of my neck. And, in those tests that used to be in person, you've got the head of casting from Warner Brothers, the head of casting from the WB, all the execs, So I learned my lesson that day because they made the wrong choice. And, the next year, I had to say to Chris Pratt that I apologized to him. And I said, I did not speak up for you in the room, and I was wrong, and I will never not do that again. And the next year I brought him in for Everwood when I was casting, Emily Van Camp's twin brother, who was just like a stupid stoner kid. And I didn't even have to fight for him. He was great. But I learned, like, I have to speak up when I.
All right, so Patrick, I think we all like go through that period of time where we think we have the confidence to say something, but we don't. Wouldn't you say?
Right.
Would you say for you in your career that was the year for you that took you to another level as far as interior? Not forget about the titles and all of that stuff, where you were like, you know what, I'm never not going to speak up again, and because you knew you had the confidence, you just weren't confident enough to speak up.
I don't know that it was like a light switch moment, and it's certainly an easier story to tell now that Chris Pratt's a major movie star, But I do remember, like, I'm never going to not at least be heard. Because you know what happened? The kid they picked, they fired after the pilot.
Oh.
And Chris Pratt wasn't available. And yeah, I remember who it was, but I won't say his name. Anyway, but, and then it was like, Chris Pratt came off Everwood. I think that ran for 4 or 5 seasons. And then I was casting the OC, and I said to Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, who are amazing and are so good to me, I said, there's this kid, Chris Pratt, he's coming off Everwood. You guys would love, I know you guys, you'd love him. And, they put him on the show, and I think he was supposed to do 3 episodes, and he did like 10 or 15. And then J.J. Philbin, who was one of the writers on the OC that season, was married to one of the producers of Parks and Rec. And she told her husband, she's like, I know you can't get that role cast on Parks and Rec. You have to see this kid from our show, And so seeing that happen for him, and that was before he was a movie star. That was when he was like the schlubby second banana guy. And it's so funny now, every pilot you cast with the 35-year-old male lead, everyone wants Chris. Like, we want the new Chris Pratt. And I'm like, well, get the chubby guy with a sense of humor and put him in the gym for 6 months. Because a lot of these leading guys didn't have to develop a sense of humor or a personality. Chris was,
That's a very good
he
point.
wasn't a leading, they made him a leading man, and he's good at it.
Yeah. And Patrick,
No, all these,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
what, go ahead.
I'm from
No,
the
you go
OC, so in a way, you put us on the map, even though it was shot in Manhattan Beach, from what I read.
I know. Well, because you guys were out of the drive-to zone. You were beyond 35 miles.
But it was cast so perfectly because, like I think it was middle school for me when it debuted, and we heard about the show. Everyone was like, it's probably not going to be accurate and stuff. And then we started watching it, and it was like, wow, this is exactly like not like my life, but like the people around me. Like, you walk to the mall, you recognize, oh, there's the rich housewife who's like cheating on her husband, and all that stuff. And there's like the blonde kid with the surfer hairdo, and
Here's what I will say about the OC. I fought against Misha Barton.
Oh.
Misha was 16. She was actually 15 when she tested. And then after the pilot got picked up, she turned 16. But she looked 23, 24. She looked very mature. So we had to cast, she got cast first. So we then had to cast boys that were a little older because she was gonna look the wrong age. But she tested against Olivia Wilde, who I thought, and I spoke up and I said, I think Olivia Wilde is the answer, you guys. But I was at that time, Ryan, I was wrong, because Misha really did become a star from the OC. Right. She was the girl who got all the commercials and was on all the magazine covers, and she was the it girl. But I never saw what other people saw in Misha. Look, I shouldn't wait. See, I forget I'm recording this and other people can watch. Oops. Anyway, let me say this. She was legitimately a lovely girl. But I do think what has happened with her acting career speaks more than I could about. But she was perfect for that part.
Right.
She really was. And, and I think Olivia Wilde's just fine.
Right. And I'm so curious, did you ever do any research by like driving up and like going around the malls, or how? Because it just felt so perfect.
No, but I will tell you that as a kid, the last week of August and the first week of September every year, we would vacation in Balboa.
Oh, okay. So you knew, I
kind of grew up at the fun zone,
okay.
If you know what I mean.
Yes.
Like that. My dad would pile all the kids in the station wagon. They'd roll up the windows. They were both smoking, with the windows up and no seatbelts on. And we would just careen down to Balboa and grow up on that beach that was, those waves were so dangerous, and my parents would just send us out there with like zinc oxide on our noses. The fact that none of us died in that ocean, I can't believe.
That's hilarious. Wow.
But also, I do have to say, like, that script, Josh Schwartz wrote that script when he was 26. I met him when he was 26. And I just remember thinking, I had been around the teen drama world for a while with, the Party of Five and the Dawson's Creek, that stuff. And I just thought, this one's different. This one truly has humor, and he gets it. Because he wasn't a 45-year-old writing a script about teenagers. I mean, Josh wasn't much older than Ben McKenzie and Adam Brody in real life.
Right.
I mean, they were like 22 and 23, and Josh was 26. So he really had his ear to the music. He still does. And to that world. He wasn't, he knew what he was doing.
And I know they had a Gossip Girl spinoff. Do you think they're going to have like an OC spinoff at some point? Or
I don't know. I don't know. I know there's a book coming out in next month, I think, called like the 20-year history of the OC. Some Rolling Stone writer that's famous wrote it. Like it's kind of a tell-all, or I don't know. But he interviewed a bunch of us. He interviewed me, and then I was telling him about all the notes I kept from the pilot. And he's like, "Is there any chance you could find those for me?" And I was like, Jeffrey Drew, who has worked with me for 15, 16 years, he knows if anything ever happens to me, burn the notebooks.
I can imagine.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's funny. When the OC was coming to an end, Josh called me into his office and said, "Okay, dude, I have 2 pilots and I want you to cast one of them." And I'm like, no more crying pretty white kids, please. And he said, well, one of them's called Gossip Girl. And I said, it sounds exactly like what I don't want to do anymore. And I said, what's the other one? He goes, it's about computer nerds, and it's called Chuck. And I'm like, please let me do Chuck. And, Gossip Girl was a great show. I would love to have it on my resume, trust me. But I loved Chuck so much. It ran for 5 seasons. It was the little underdog show that could. So I'm so grateful that I didn't do Gossip Girl and that I did Chuck. I get to work. It was a comedy, and Zach Levi's doing pretty well. Yvonne Strahovski's doing pretty well. It was like a pretty solid cast. I loved that show.
Nobody does special programs like One-on-One Next Level. It's where we really help actors shine.
I'm Emilio. I signed with my Southeast agent right after the Atlanta trip, and now I'm auditioning several times every month. And I almost didn't do the Atlanta trip because I thought it was just another cash grab. I can tell you from experience that it's not. That's not how One-on-One Next Level rolls. And here we are 6 months later, and I already booked my first job with my Atlanta agent.
I'm Rebecca, and the Bridge program demystified the industry for me. It gave me the platform to get off book in under 10 minutes. I met 60 new artists that are now all a part of my community, and I even signed with a manager. I have never walked away from a program so confident in my abilities. I'm so grateful for One-on-One Next Level.
My name is Capenna, and I can finally call myself a working actor after participating in the LA Super Showcase. I had just moved to LA and I felt stuck. I came across the LA Super Showcase, and let me tell you, it was a life-changing experience. I signed with an agent, and since then, I've been auditioning for series regulars and booked my first TV job. I finally feel like I made it to the next level, thanks to One-on-One Next Level.
In the next 12 months, One-on-One Next Level will host 27 special programs bringing you unmatched exclusive access to industry connections. Special programs aren't just a one-and-done class. Instead, they're designed to accomplish in a weekend what it takes most actors months, even years to do. So whether you want to get repped in a smaller market like Atlanta, bypass casting directors and connect directly with TV showrunners and decision makers, or spend a weekend meeting a bunch of musical theater industry professionals in New York City, you have to become a member to be eligible to sign up for our special programs. To apply, go to www.oneononenextlevel.com. We can't wait to hear your success story.
Patrick, what lights you up the most about what you do?
What lights me up the most?
What's something that comes to mind that you really love about what you do?
I mean, I'm absolutely the luckiest guy because, I've worked hard and I love what I do. But to get to have a job where you get to play just a small part in making people's dreams come true, how fucking good is that? Yeah. Or you get to you bring somebody in and they get a day player role, and then you get a thank you note from them, and they say that you have no idea how much I needed that part. I made my insurance for the year. That kind of stuff. I still laugh when they let me drive on the lots places. I just still think they're going to look up my name and arrest me. You push that button and the gate goes up. I still giggle when I drive off and go, oh my God, I fooled him again. I never lose sight of the fact that I love actors. Actors are the reason I keep working. I never wanted to be an actor. So my side of the desk has compassion and less sort of, I want actors to feel safe with me and to know that I'm on their side and I'm a fan. Because, there are people who do what I do who intimidate and scare actors, and actors see they're going into audition for somebody and they're immediately afraid just because of that person. That person's doing it wrong. I want actors to see that they're coming in to see me and they know it's a safe place. And I never lose sight of the fact that it's the actors who have kept me working, and a handful of people who hire me over and over again. I'm very lucky. Very lucky.
I love that you're such an air of positivity. And the one thing I loved hearing about what you had to say about the auditions via tape is that it really has created an opportunity for a lot of actors that may not have had that opportunity. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, it's double-edged because I miss actors' auditions in person. And, mostly because I love actors. When I'm doing that, I don't have to be on the phone and I don't have to be replying to emails. That's my job. The job of being with actors, Um, but I know, it's easier for everyone to do a self tape, you know, and it's easier to see more people via self tape. But, when you're 5 years ago casting a pilot, I would see 12 people in the morning and 12 in the afternoon, and you'd upload the 5 best at the end of the day and send them to the producers. At 7:15 at night now, you get 150 self tapes. I did an Apple pilot last year called City on Fire, and it was, again, young leads. It was a 19-year-old girl and an 18-year-old boy. And I watched 750 self-tapes for the male role and over 900 for the female.
Okay, now when you say you watch them, I'm just curious, and because you're an honest guy, do you watch the whole thing, or you watch like the first 20 seconds, and if there's no need to go on, you just stop it?
It depends. I'm not a casting director who will ever send out 12 pages. It's just ridiculous. And luckily, when you get to work for people over and over again, like Josh and Stephanie, who I've referenced before, they know that they can send out one scene. We can get if it's somebody good, I send it to them, and then they go, let's give them a call back and give them the second scene. So did I watch every single moment of 900 plus tapes for the female? No, because when you just start doing the math on a 5-minute self-tape and you get 100 a day, it doesn't add up. But it is where Jeffrey Drew and Tim Pratt, they would be, watch this girl. I don't know about this girl. I think she had some, but also what's happening is there's agents and managers are sending those auditions. I have no idea technically how to upload it, audition, or shorten it or whatever. That's why there's other people. I'm past the age of learning how to do that. But oftentimes the agent and manager will send me the auditions directly to my email. I mean, I've had the same email for 20 years. It's my personal email. It's my work email. Everyone has it. And so if I'm sitting at my desk and I see somebody send me, an audition link, I'm going to watch it the minute it comes in because it's one less I have to watch later. And every once in a while, that's like, that's the one. So I do try, but, I also miss the days where you would be casting a pilot and after 2 weeks of doing auditions, the studio's wanting to know when you're testing because we've got a timeline. But on the Apple show, Apple didn't have a timeline, and they were tough, but they were right to make us keep looking, and we did, and they were right.
And would you say from when you started to today, where there's all of these streaming opportunities for actors, it seems like there are a lot more opportunities for actors regarding TV and film than before. Is that not correct?
I think so. And I think that, yeah, absolutely. And I also, when you get hired to do a pilot and you start those ridiculous name lists at first, and, I remember casting a pilot for ABC Family years ago, and I'm like, you're not going to really make me put Michelle Pfeiffer on the list for the mom, are you? And they said no, and then they made me check her availability, which, by the way, I never did. I just said she's not interested. But Michelle Pfeiffer's not doing an ABC Family pilot for $25K. Let's just be real. But when you do those lists and you start those avail checks, a lot of people are there are lots of people working that used to be available. But, think about the actresses now in their 50s, 60s, 70s, those character actresses who've been around, and Meryl Streep is doing number 4 on the call sheet on Murders in the Building. Like, how do you compete with Meryl Streep not being the star of a show and kind of a recurring guest star? It's a different world now, It's harder. It is harder. All this technology that was supposed to make it easier has made it harder.
I feel like we could all agree on that for sure in so many different ways. Speaking of, I still remember the days when you would pull up to our old Next Level space and you're like, I think you drove like a pickup truck or something. And then like you came out with like this large, like I think it was soda from 7-Eleven or some kind of like a huge, and you were just,
Diet Coke, the big Diet Coke.
you
Yeah,
were, you were
absolutely.
just a hoot, and like everyone loved you. Such like, you were, like Mark said, you beam positivity.
And humility.
Yes. And
Oh, thank you.
I like, so I'm curious because this podcast, we started to celebrate the studio's 30th anniversary, and it hasn't always been an easy journey for the studio, and it required a lot of perseverance and will to just see it through. I know the same is true in the casting profession. It's not always easy. There's highs and lows. Can you share a story where you had to kind of persevere against the odds or really push through, or maybe a time when you thought you weren't going to continue in casting, and how you went through it?
Yeah, I'll give you two quick instances. About, I'm so bad with time now. Like it could have been like I want to say it was 5 years ago. The truth is, it was about 15 years ago. Mary Buck was head of casting at Warner Brothers. Mary Buck, the dreamiest dream casting person of all time. Lovely, lovely, lovely. And for whatever reason, I'd had a great streak of good luck with Warner Brothers shows, the studio. I had done 13 pilots for them in a row that had all been picked up. And so Mary Buck she was lovely to me, and so she wanted me to go there and be in the corporate world with her, and in that hallway with like Tony Sullivan, where John Power is, all those people. And I'm like, Mary, I love you. I'm not corporate. She was like, please, and they're talking about like money and figures and whatever. Anyway, so she calls me over and she's like, Patty, come over and have a cigarette with me. Oops, sorry. Anyway, so I'm in the back alley smoking with Mary Buck, like a couple of bad Catholic schoolgirls, and out walks Peter Roth, the head of Warner Brothers. And I'm like, oh, we're in trouble for smoking, And he came out there and like talked me into taking this job. And he was like 401k, stock options, and I was like, what? Hell, I didn't. It sounded good. And here was Peter Roth, who was the guy who was in all the tests, and the head of I was always like, oh, it scares me. Lovely man. The next thing I know, I take that job, and I wasn't corporate. I knew I wasn't corporate. That job was about putting out fires, and I still like to start them.
I know that.
Yes, So anyway, after about 9 months, I went to Mary Buck and I said, Mary, I love you so much and I hate this job so much. Please let me go. And you know what they did? But what I didn't realize is like, oh, shoot, I gave up season 3 of the OC. I had just done the Supernatural pilot and it got picked up and I couldn't do the show. Of course, another Patrick Rush, great decision. The show that went for 14 years.
Right. I was like, I think that's still on, isn't it?
I can't do it. I'm corporate now. But you know what I did? And that was a job that was lucrative and consistent. And for 3 years, I wouldn't even have to worry about a paycheck. You know what I mean? We're independent contractors. But I just knew for my sanity and truly for my sobriety, because I'm that guy who probably would have started taking Xanax or Valium. And, if one is good, I'll take 9. And then I'm throwing things out windows and people. I make deadline finally for Patrick Rush being taken away, and Britney Spears 5150 lockdown from the Warner Brothers. So anyway, so I had to kind of like go, oh shit. But I called Josh and Stephanie at the OC, and I'm like, you guys, I'm quitting. And they're like, come back for season 4. And then I had to go on job interviews, and I got jobs right away. And so I forget your question, but I don't know if I answered it. But that was okay. That was one of those times I was afraid. I was afraid because I knew I'd made a mistake from day one. And then, I'm 62. That's the truth. It's over for me in Hollywood. I'm a 62-year-old white guy. Let's be honest. It's not my turn anymore. I had a good run. My white privilege has served me well, my entire life. And so about 6 years ago, I was like, maybe it's over. You know, I hadn't gotten a pilot, and I was like, maybe my time, and getting into acceptance about like, I've had a good run. I've had a good run. And then all of a sudden, like, well, I've been busier in the past couple of years than I ever was. Even like when, everybody went down during COVID, but after COVID, I try to not be like a glutton and take a bunch of jobs because I don't think casting people need to do 7 shows at a time. I also know that I'm not equipped to do that. But I was doing 3 things at once. Now, let me tell you, the money's very nice when you're doing 3 things at once, but it's exhausting. And so I was like, you know what? It's not over yet. And now these strikes have come up. And I'm thinking, well, when we go back to work, is it over?
Right.
I'm competing for work now from people half my age. And I'm not the demographic of what people are looking for anymore. And I don't say that with any sort of malice at all. I mean, I've had a good run as a white man in this business. And I think the women should take over. I think diverse women should run this country and the world. I think it'd be a better place to live. But, I know that when I'm going in on a job interview against young gals, and if they happen to be attractive, they're getting the gig. They're getting the gig. So it's funny. It's funny. So I'm in that point right now where, I want to go back to work. I've had 2 work calls this week, but yes, of course I'm available. Is anyone working?
Right.
I know some people are going back to work, but yeah, I'm available. And so it's nice that I'm still getting inquiries.
You're
And
eternally youthful, and so you will work as long as you want to.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you from your lips.
No, you're such
That's
a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Can't tell you enough how much we appreciate.
Well, I've asked how many, like 30 plus people that question. And actually, nobody's really answered. Right now's a tough time that I'm, working things through. And I think that's the breath of fresh air. You're honest, you're relatable, and you're, down to earth.
Well, here's the thing about us and actors. We all need that next job. I mean, I lose my health insurance on Halloween, October 31st. I haven't been without health insurance in 20 years.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, really? I've worked a lot and I don't have enough hours. Yeah. I don't. And you know what? I'll go on Covered Care California and I'll get my own plan. I have been so at peace with these strikes in a weird way because I know I have no power over how long they're going to last and if they're going to settle and when we're all going back to work. And that I think is just kind of comes with age.
Yeah.
Like I bet a lot of 30-year-old people who do what I do, who did what I did when I was 30, I would have been panicked too.
Right.
I didn't want to sell my house in Sherman Oaks. I lived there 23 years, but I knew what was coming, and I knew it was either take $100,000 in equity out of my house to live for the next year and maybe never work again, or sell it and get out of Dodge while I can. And, hopefully I can work remotely and get to I'm 2 hours from town. I can get to town when needed.
By the environment behind you, it doesn't look like you're suffering.
I will tell you, July and August in Palm Desert, it's like the 4th ring of Satan's ass. It is. I'm telling you, Mark, it is nothing. And I grew up in the valley. I grew up in Sherman Oaks. It's hot in the valley.
Yeah.
Like 3 weeks of being 117 degrees with this Irish fucking Catholic skin burning off my arms. I was really struggling my first couple of months here and thinking I've made a huge mistake. And this week it's in the 80s, and next week it'll be in the 70s. And so I'm going to enjoy it. Yeah. Me and the dog are much happier.
Well, I'm kind of bummed. I was never invited to one of your famous Halloween extravaganzas or your pool parties where he had these giant he goes all out. It's or July 4th. This is a decorator.
I'm a holiday kid. It's weird when you come from this sounds so tragic, but I don't mean it. When you come from a fucked up childhood where it was it wasn't Christmas if the cops didn't come and all your holidays are ruined. As an adult, I just made the decision, my holidays are never going to be ruined again. And I just overdo everything. I mean, there's nothing I do half measures. It's all out. But, moving into a 55 plus community, I've decorated my house. And let me tell you, I got it all lit up and I'm thinking, oh, there are no kids. I used to live in my house in Sherman Oaks and I had 50 kids in my front yard. And now it's like old people on golf carts going, what is he doing? But you know what? It's lit up.
Right.
I'm the house here that is, but it's lit
I mean,
up.
wouldn't you say, Patrick, your old house in Sherman Oaks, like when you went all out for like Halloween and stuff, it used to be one of those like like people would talk about it. It's like they would,
it was on the news.
Yeah.
Wow.
There were years for Christmas where I had 15 tons of snow blown into my front yard, which is, by the way, ridiculous, like Kardashian expendable money stuff. But I would try to write it off on my business taxes. My accountant would be like, why did you spend $2,500 on ice? And I said,
there's one other cast. I don't know if you know him, but there's one other casting director. He's in New York who also goes all out on Halloween, and his house ends up on the news
In New York.
In New York. I'll see if Patrick knows.
who is
Ross Myers.
I don't know.
Is this house all the way in Brooklyn?
In Brooklyn.
Oh yeah, that area, that whole area is like.
But he goes all. I mean, it's like a
Wow.
famous. It's on the feature on the news too.
Wow.
But see, I would get like 500 or 600 trick-or-treaters. And last week I went to dinner with my old neighbors from across the street, and we were talking. And I said, so who moved into my house? They said, oh, this lovely, single woman. She's like 35, 40. She's got 2 dogs. And I said, you guys better tell her to like buy candy for Halloween. These kids will torch that house.
Right.
Because it would be like I saw kids from infancy to like 13 years old every year.
Wow.
It was minivans would pull up and the door would slide open and they just let kids out in front of my house. It was, if you build it, they will come.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of
And you must be
decorated.
on the last point. I think you must be a really great boss or person to work for, because Jeffrey Drew has been your associate for like, I think that's probably like the record in the industry, right?
16 years.
Wow.
16.
That's
And
great.
before Jeffrey was Todd Sherry, and Todd was with me like 10 years. And before that, like Allison Silverberg and Barbara Stordahl
Whoa.
were with me for years. Now, here's the thing about Jeffrey. Jeffrey and I have been friends for 35 years. We've known each other for 35 years. And Jeffrey at one point like moved to New York and thought he was going to be a showgirl. And I was like, okay. Anyway, he moved back from New York and he moved into my house in Sherman Oaks. And after like a couple months, I was like, girl, what's the plan? To get out of my house. So I said, listen, I will hire you so you can get out of my house. And so basically, I have kept him employed 16 years just to keep him out of my house.
Incredible.
I love that story.
That's a great story.
That's a great story.
The thing is, Jeffrey's so lovely and has been on the other side of the desk, and he really loves actors too. And he is a much better version of me in a lot of ways as a human being. He's quite amazing. And we've been friends forever.
There's an inside joke. People go, that must be the gayest office ever with Patrick Rush and Jeffrey Drew.
And you know what? Let's put most of that on Jeffrey, because I am not as gay as Jeffrey.
Right.
No one is as gay as Jeffrey.
And I know Gail Pillsbury views you as a mentor as well.
Yeah, we all came from that Lieberman Hirschfeld office back in the day. It was Sharon Klein, Grace Wu, Gail Pillsbury, Bonnie Zane, Brian Myers, Michael Ketcher.
All in one office.
Debbie Romano, Brett Benner.
Whoa.
I'm forgetting Mary Sugarman, who's a big casting director in New York.
Yes. It's incredible.
Wow.
It was a bullpen full of Michael Ketcher, who runs FX casting now. Like, it was quite a place to come out, to launch out of.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's a whole story right there.
That Lieberman Hirschfeld office was great. I know I'm forgetting something. Angela Terry. There were a lot of good people. At the same time, we were all there.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't done it yet, please support Heart to Heart with a 5-star rating and a review.